The secret to happiness, this is what you all came for. The secret to happiness is low expectations.
I love that. You'll do. Okay, so what does this mean in a cultural sense? If every person out there has 1,000 choices of things that they're going to do, and they spend a lot of time carefully considering those choices, and they decide to come to your concert, and what they get is only, at best, what they hoped they would get, what does that do when your sense of adventure, or you want to introduce them to something or take risks with something? It makes it a whole different proposition of what it is that you're trying to do. Which means, again, that you cannot have a traditional consumer transaction relationship with your audience anymore, where you try and offer the best possible program, they make a choice based on that, of what they think is the best possible program. It can't be a relationship based on that consumer transaction. There's another problem. One is that we're living in a time right now where things are changing very quickly, and we have different segments of audience which are still tied by their demography. So the pre-boomer generation are people who grew up with a view of the world that you went out, you became educated, you looked for quality, you did things. This was the pre-television. They didn't have television. These are the people who, for years and years, mocked television as being less than something to aspire to, right? So their way of understanding the world is very analog-based. They like the feel of pages in the hand. That's how they relate with people. They also, pardon me, before I finish that, they also want to have their cultural experiences perhaps in public, but they want their reactions to be largely in private. They want to be able to go back and digest it afterwards. The boomers, on the other hand, are people who grew up at the beginning of the television age. They're used to having an experience where the world opened up to them through television, and that they could see all of a sudden windows on an awful lot of things. And while they're not rooted in technology, they had this experience of technology bringing things to them. No expectation here that they would give something to technology. Television was something that came to you. Radio was something that came to you. It was not something that you participated in necessarily. You get to the X and Y generation, where maybe their father had this is the 1980s, people growing up in the 80s. Maybe their parents had an Apple computer, an Apple II in the house, but it was only for typing, and it didn't have graphics, right? And while it could do some amazing things, some computational things, and some really kind of basic things that were previously hard to do, it wasn't an interactive experience. So they're used to growing up with technology. They grew up with this expectation of technology, but that technology wasn't networked. It wasn't something, even though they were inputting into the technology, they weren't interacting with other people. Finally, you get to the millennials, those people born around 1990 or so, who are 20 years old now. And these are people who grew up in the IM generation, the instant message generation, and the Facebook generation. And their expectations are completely different. Their expectations are that technology is to be used to link you up with other people, to network you with other people. If you have a problem, if you have a question, if you have something that you're trying to do, the first thing you do is you reach out through technology and you ask somebody. Or, if you're not asking somebody, you want to share the experience of whatever it is that's meaningful for you through the technology. This is a very different way of using technology than the generations before. So the question is if you've got all of these different kinds of people perceiving their cultural experiences in different planes with various levels of technology, How is it that you can appeal to the pre-boomer age at the same time you get to the millennial age? It's increasingly a problem because those are not necessarily compatible ways in which we appreciate technology or want to have a cultural experience in person. The average person who grew up in 1990 has watched 50,000 hours of television by now. 50,000 hours. What that means is that television is a passive experience. And is there any question why people want to be interactive? If you've watched 50,000 hours of passive experience, what do you want? What's the unusual thing? What's the scarcity? It's the ability to reach out and have an interaction with people. The passive experience is not something that younger people are interested in now. They want to have that kind of interaction. So, if my way of sharing culture is to be able to pass on this, then how do you accommodate that for people for whom that is not what they want? Okay, so we do the concert, we send it out to the audience. But the problem is we have to get this audience, right? So in the traditional way, we go to the newspapers because the newspapers talk to all of these people. Problem is that newspaper is a sort of a broadcast medium, and we don't know which people, we don't know how to target those people specifically enough to be able to get to them. So newspaper, radio, television, all broadcast, and it often misses the audience that we're trying to get. So, okay, everybody now has Facebook, they have Twitter, they have blogs, they have YouTube, everybody's creating more stuff. And now we're the always-on 24/7 you, right? That's pretty cool because what that means is that we can talk directly to the audience without having to broadcast. We can talk completely to them rather than having to go through a third party like the newspaper. But there's a problem. The problem is you've got this. So if you're doing Twitter, if you're doing YouTube, if you're doing Facebook, the way that most arts organizations are doing all of these things is they're creating more broadcast channels by which they can create more material which goes out to more people. What's the problem with that? This, you're adding to the noise. You're adding all sorts of stuff that people have to sort through that makes it more difficult for them, not less difficult. You're not solving any of their problems, you're adding to their problems. And that's a real problem because you're not going to cultivate relationships with people just by creating more content. It just doesn't work that way. What we need instead is a strategy in which you're actually talking to, not just talking to people and creating more channels, but you become a structure, an infrastructure by which everybody else can talk to themselves, right? This is a different idea of an arts organization than the traditional one. Traditionally is, we produce something, we send it out to you, you take it and go away somewhere. If we're really enlightened, we think that we can, that you can talk back to us and we'll have a conversation. But that's not really what it is. What we really need to be is, instead of being a producer, we need to do something interesting, which is why people want to be around us. But then we want to be that infrastructure to enable them not only to talk to us, but to talk to one another. So we want to use social media not as a way of just broadcasting, but of creating conversation around us. Why is this important? Okay, so there's some big changes that have come about the ways people want to consume their culture. On Facebook right now, there are 500 million users. The average person has 130 friends, and they watch 30.3 billion, that's with a B, videos, average of 4 minutes. The average person creates 90 pieces of content each month. Now that can be, that can be a little video, it can be pictures, it can be blog posts, it can be, whatever it is. But they're creating something. This is not passive people. It's creation of something. And they uploaded their own videos 20 million times. There were 20 million videos uploaded. That's a piker compared to YouTube. YouTube, it's in the billions of videos that get uploaded every month. But here's the interesting thing, is they shared 30 billion pieces of content. 30 billion pieces. What that means is that people have an expectation that when something they do or something they participate in, some experience they have, is significant to them, the cultural act is not complete, the experience is not complete until they've passed it on in some way, some tangible way. That is part of the cultural experience now. Well, let's ask ourselves, if that is true, how easy do we make it for our audiences to do that? Go into a museum, what do you see? Go into a concert hall, what do you see? I was at Jazz at Lincoln Center a couple of weeks ago, sitting with the director. The person in front of us was taking videos. So James Cotton was on stage, taking videos with the iPhone, and it wasn't bothering anybody. But an usher came running down the aisle and said, no, 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 you can't take the picture, you can't. We walked out and I said, you know, that person wasn't doing anything. I mean, they just wanted to share it with their friends. Actually, the value to you, the value to the artist in passing something like that on is huge. Why wouldn't you let them do it? He said, well, actually, no reason. Most of our artists would be happy to do that, but some of them, they don't want to allow it, and so we just have a general policy that we don't do it. Now, let me ask you again, if an essential part of the cultural experience now for more and more people is the ability to pass it on, and we're actively discouraging people from doing it, that's a problem. I know we have rights issues and musician issues around this, but this is a problem. That's a structural problem that we have to solve somehow. So you don't want to just be creating more content that goes there. You want to be able to be that structure that allows people to have conversations with themselves, have relationships with you through them, because you can empower them to do some interesting things. Okay, so here are 5 things that I think that, 5 ways to sort of think about how you start to have those relationships with people in this kind of world. Number 1, be transparent. We like the idea of being able to control the message of, you know, the season brochure, for instance. We don't announce our season until a specific date because it gets a splash, it'll get us a story in the paper. But why? You know, increasingly newspapers are not the way people are getting their information. We ought to be transparent about how the organization works. We ought to live life in public. We're public institutions, we ought to live life in public. We ought to make sure that the context of what it is that we do as an orchestra is assemble programs, assemble communities who care about the kinds of things that we're doing. So you need to be transparent. Here's an example. This is the Indianapolis Museum of Art, and what they decided is they were going to make every piece of information that they have available to people. So they created this site called the dashboard. And you can go on here and you can find out how many kilowatt hours of electricity they burn every day. You can find out how many visits so far to the museum. If you go here and click on the Google map here, you can see that 5 people came from Gig Harbor, Washington yesterday. You can even see the value of their endowment as of the close of business yesterday. They don't know how this is going to change the relationship, or how, pardon me, they don't know how people are going to use this information. They just know that by making it public and everything that they do transparent, it changes the relationship with their audience, right? What it allows the audience to do is to make up their own minds, to discuss it, find the little nuggets that are important to them, create things around those nuggets, and to have a deeper relationship with the organization.